I want you to be excited about the next 18 months and then the next 4 years after that. And I want you to remind everybody else those simple words that summed up our campaign in 2008 and still sum up our spirit. Yes, we can. Thank you, everybody. God bless you.
That was, of course, President Obama late last night at a fundraiser in Los Angeles. He was trying to evoke the spirit of 2008 as he revs up for his 2012 campaign. Now, much of that speech was a direct message to his critics on the left who are feeling disappointed and disillusioned by the first 2 years of his presidency.
I know the conversations you've been having. Oh, I don't know, I don't like that compromise with the Republicans. Look, there are times where I've been frustrated, just like you have been. But we knew this wasn't going to be easy.
I don't think anybody thought the change was going to be easy. We just didn't want it to be so easy for the Republicans to win on their priorities, like the Bush tax cuts. But that's just one of many issues that progressives have with the president. In fact, just hours earlier, in San Francisco, he was interrupted by singing protesters asking for more change.
We paid our dues, where's our change? We paid our dues, where's our change?
That was them singing, "We paid our dues, where's our change?" It's a little catchy. And that's exactly why the president was trying to address progressive critics in that LA speech we showed you. He knows that's a sentiment among some of his voters, so again, he appealed to them to remember 2008.
All of us can still remember that night in Grant Park. The excitement on the streets, the sense of possibility. I want to make sure we are putting the campaign in your hands. The hands of the same organizers, the same volunteers, the same neighborhood folks.
Now, the president's issues with the left is reflected in his polling among self-described liberals. In April of 2009, 3 months after the inauguration, 90% of liberals approved of the job that he was doing. In April of 2010, just after the health care law passed, it had dropped all the way down to 81%. Not bad. And now it's at 70%. Look, 70% is still a pretty good number, but you clearly see it sliding away from him. He needs every one of those votes if he's going to win again. The problem for the president when it comes to the left is his record, honestly. Just check out the last 2 years. Gitmo stays open, financial reform is incredibly weak, the president helps the deep six the public option, there's more tax cuts for the rich, and there's the huge spending cuts that he just agreed to, and the list goes on. But the opportunity for the president is in the next 18 months. You know, he's still president. There's still a long way to go. So will he stand his ground on taxes, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security? The most important fights are still ahead of us. Will he keep listening to Washington insiders who counsel that he must agree with the Republicans to seem centrist, or will he regain his progressive footing? You know, one way you can convince people that you're a progressive is by being a progressive. Now let's bring in two different voices to get their perspectives on this. Joining me now is David Sirota, radio host and syndicated columnist. Also with us, Joe Madison, host with Sirius XM Radio, both old friends. In fact, I used to fill in for Joe back in Washington a long, long time ago on his radio show. All right, Joe, let me start with you. You know, I laid out a little bit of a list there. Do you have a spirited defense of the president's progressive credentials?
Yeah, I have a spirited defense because, as you saw in the GW, the George Washington speech, he drew the line on some of the major points you just talked about: Medicaid, Medicare, education. And then he turned around and he said, okay, who's behind me? I think earlier in the program, you made a very good point. One of the things that the right is very good at doing is organizing outside of the Beltway. And that's what we have to do. We have to organize, much the way the people in Madison, Wisconsin organize, and it has to be a groundswell from the grassroots. One of the things that bugs me to death about progressives, we are terrible organizers when it comes to trying to provide a counterbalance. Now, finally, let me say this. I'm old enough to remember when Martin Luther King Jr., after the '64 Civil Rights Act was passed, he went to Johnson and said, we need a Voting Rights Act. And Johnson said, make me do it. And that's how we got Selma to Montgomery. And that's how we got a Voting Rights Act. And what progressives have to do, and I think what I heard the president just say, make me do what you want me to do.
But David, if they're going to do that, doesn't that mean that they've got to pressure the president and put some real, you know, be tough with them? I mean, how do you make someone do something unless you're tough with them?
That's the question, right? I mean, the problem, I think, for the left right now is that so many people on the left in our red versus blue country are organized not necessarily around an agenda, but around an individual. And it's the same goes for the right under George Bush. I think on the progressive left, in the progressive movement, too many people are organized around whatever President Obama does and says is great, just like the right was organized around whatever George Bush does and says is great. Your point is exactly the right point, that if we want a different list, that list that you just showed up there of a new war, of spending cuts aimed at Medicare, of new Bush tax cuts, of extending the Bush record on civil liberties in many cases, if we want a different list than that, then we cannot be organized around the idea that whatever President Obama says is good and whatever Republicans do is bad. We need to be organized around an agenda, because if there is no pressure on President Obama, if we are organized only around the individual, then there will be no real change.
So, Joe, let's talk about that, because, you know, if we want to stop that concept that, you know, that you guys are talking about, that we just, you know, agree with whatever the president says, well, then we got to disagree with him, don't we? I mean, when he does the compromise we don't like with the Republicans because we don't think it was not that because we're against compromise, but because we thought it was a bad compromise, don't we have to call him out on it?
Well, of course you have to call them out. Look, here in Washington, D.C., didn't Eleanor Holmes Norton call the president out? The former mayor of Washington, D.C., Sharon Pratt Kelly, and the first lady of the first elected mayor, they tried to deliver a letter saying, Mr. President, at least put no taxation on your limousine. Couldn't even get the letter delivered. They called him out. But at the same time, we have to understand something. Candidates run on transformational leadership. When they get elected, it becomes transactional. And it's how you transact business in Washington that makes you successful. And keep in mind, you've got to get him elected into the next term. And everybody used to say when he first got elected, don't expect him to do everything in 4 years. Remember, there's a second term here, and I'm certain that's what's in the back of his mind.
Well, David, I saw you shaking your head. Go for it.
I mean, my answer to that is that it's just a justification for the status quo. That's simply saying that we're only playing for the next election, we're playing for the next election, and we're playing for the next election. It's a justification for the status quo. I think as citizens we have an obligation, not a right, but an obligation to look at the record that was accumulated in the first 4 years of the Obama presidency and say not what was tried to be done and what didn't happen, but what did this administration actually not even try to do, arguably did the exact opposite of what it said it was going to do. And I think progressives have every right to say we're not going to be organized around an individual. We're going to be organized around a set of issues. And if this president deviates from that, then we're not going to be with him when he asks for our vote again. I mean, this is not a president who tried to get the public option. This is a president who went out of his way to subvert the public option. This is not a president who tried to stop the Bush tax cuts. This is a president who went out of his way to extend the Bush tax cuts. I could go on, but you get my point.
Sometimes progressives really tick me off. And if he hadn't tried to transact away, they would have kicked a lot of poor people that progressive claim that they are interested in absolutely under the bus.
And instead they gave away billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to the drug and insurance companies. Hundreds of billions of dollars of your taxpayer dollars and my taxpayer dollars because they didn't put up a fight. The problem, my thing is, the problem with progressives is progressives want to say whatever the president says, if he gives us a lot of flowery speeches, that's great. We don't want to look under the hood and say, hey, what did he actually do? Because the problem is when you actually look at what he actually did, it's not such a nice picture. I'm sick and tired of progressives being organized around speeches. I want a progressive movement that's organized around results.
Progressives, for the most part, are the lousiest organizers there are. They don't, all they do is a lot of talk. If you want to end the war, then do what folks did to end the Vietnam War. Get the hell out there and march.
Amen. Amen. Get out there and protest the war in Libya.
No, but all right, last thing here, guys.
And then
last thing,
and of course, what's going to happen? You're going to end up with a president worse than you think.
But Joe,
now.
I got to ask you the last question here.
Yeah.
Look, if you say go out there and organize, go out there and make him do it, isn't that what David is saying? I mean, don't wait on him to do it, make him do it. We got the most important fights coming. I don't want him to buckle on Medicare or Social Security. Shouldn't we aggressively challenge him to make sure that he does the right thing?
Yeah, but you don't kill him in the process.
So how do you do it then?
Well, intelligently.
I hope so. I hope so. I think we're arguing over what would be the intelligent way to do it. But
well,
guys, it's been a good conversation.
I think
it really
we're
has.
all on the same side. It's just that, look, I just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in this and end up with something far worse.
Of course, Joe, everybody agrees with that. Look, nobody's saying, oh yeah, and hence go vote for a Republican. How would that make any sense? That wouldn't make any sense at all. The question is, how do you help the Democrats? How do you help the president by effectively challenging them to be more progressive?
You do challenge, but if you don't, you think that people will go vote for a Republican. The problem is they won't go vote at all.
Cenk, can I make one very quick point? Just very quickly.
Gotta be the last one, David.
Very quick point. Progressives back in the 1960s didn't say we're worried about Lyndon Baines Johnson's re-election. They said we're worried about ending the Vietnam War, and they ended that war because they were willing, as you suggest, to go up against a president no matter what his party was. And that was a heroic act.
And excuse me, I was
but we got to leave it there.
You weren't born.
This could go on all night. Okay, we'll bring you guys back. It's a great conversation.
Thank you.
David Sirota, Joe Madison, thank you both, guys.